Section 48 of L'Assommoir. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Martin Geeson. L'Assommoir by Emile Zola. Translated by Ernest A. Visitelli. Fifth part of Chapter 10. One Saturday, Coupeau had promised to take her to the circus. It was well worth while disturbing oneself to see ladies galloping along on horses and jumping through paper hoops. Coupeau had just finished a fortnight's work. He could well spare a couple of francs. And they had also arranged to dine out, just the two of them, Nana having to work very late that evening at her employer's because of some pressing order. But at 7 o'clock there was no Coupeau. At 8 o'clock it was still the same. Gervaise was furious. Her drunkard was certainly squandering his earnings with his comrades at the dram shops of the neighbourhood. She had washed a cap and had been slaving since the morning over the holes of an old dress, wishing to look decent. At last, towards 9 o'clock, her stomach empty, her face purple with rage, she decided to go down and look for Coupeau. "Is it your husband you want?" called Madame Boche on catching sight of Gervaise looking very glum. "He's at Pere Colombe's. Boche has just been having some cherry brandy with him." Gervaise uttered her thanks and stalked stiffly along the pavement with the determination of flying at Coupeau's eyes. A fine rain was falling, which made the walk more unpleasant still, but when she reached L'Assommoir, the fear of receiving the drubbing herself if she badgered her old man suddenly calmed her and made her prudent. The shop was ablaze with the lighted gas, the flames of which were as brilliant as suns, and the bottles and jars illuminated the walls with their coloured glass. She stood there an instant, stretching her neck, her eyes close to the window, looking between two bottles placed there for show, watching Coupeau, who was right at the back. He was sitting with some comrades at a little zinc table, all looking vague and blue in the tobacco smoke, and as one could not hear them yelling, it created a funny effect to see them gesticulating with their chins thrust forward and their eyes staring out of their heads. Good heavens, was it really possible that men could leave their wives and their homes to shut themselves up thus in a hole where they were choking? The rain trickled down her neck. She drew herself up and went off to the exterior boulevard, wrapped in thought and not daring to enter. Ah, well, Coupeau would have welcomed her in a pleasant way, he who objected to be spied upon. Besides, it really scarcely seemed to her the proper place for a respectable woman. Twice she went back and stood before the shop window, her eyes again riveted to the glass, annoyed at still beholding those confounded drunkards out of the rain and yelling and drinking. The light of L'Assommoir was reflected in the puddles on the pavement, which simmered with little bubbles caused by the downpour. At length she thought she was too foolish, and pushing open the door, she walked straight up to the table where Coupeau was sitting. After all, it was her husband she came for, was it not? And she was authorized in doing so, because he had promised to take her to the circus that evening. So much the worse. She had no desire to melt like a cake of soap out on the pavement. "Hullo, it's you, old woman!" exclaimed the zinc worker, half choking with a chuckle. "Oh, that's a good joke. Isn't it a good joke now?" All the company laughed. Gervaise remained standing, feeling rather bewildered. Coupeau appeared to her to be in a pleasant humour, so she ventured to say, "You remember, we've somewhere to go. We must hurry. We shall still be in time to see something." "I can't get up. I'm glued." "Ah, without joking," resumed Coupeau, who continued laughing. "Try, just to satisfy yourself. Pull my arm with all your strength. Try it. Harder than that. Tug away. Up with it. You see, it's that louse Pere Colombe who screwed me to his seat." Gervaise had humoured him at this game, and when she let go of his arm, the comrades thought the joke so good that they tumbled up against one another, braying and rubbing their shoulders like donkeys being groomed. The zinc worker's mouth was so wide with laughter that you could see right down his throat. "You great noodle," said he at length, "you can surely sit down a minute. You're better here than splashing about outside." "Well, yes, I didn't come home as I promised. I had business to attend to. Though you may pull a long face, it won't alter matters. Make room, you others. If Madame would accept my knees, she would find them softer than the seat," gallantly said My Boots. Gervaise, not wishing to attract attention, took a chair and sat down at a short distance from the table. She looked at what the men were drinking, some rot-gut brandy which shone like gold in the glasses. A little of it had dropped upon the table, and Salted Mouth, otherwise Drink Without Thirst, dipped his finger in it while conversing, and wrote a woman's name, Eulalie, in big letters. She noticed that Bibi the smoker looked shockingly jaded and thinner than a hundredweight of nails. My Boots' nose was in full bloom, a regular purple burgundy dahlia. They were all quite dirty, their beards stiff, their smocks ragged and stained, their hands grimy with dirt. Yet they were still quite polite. Gervaise noticed a couple of men at the bar. They were so drunk that they were spilling the drink down their chins when they thought they were wetting their whistles. Fat Père Colombe was calmly serving round after round. The atmosphere was very warm. The smoke from the pipes ascended in the blinding glare of the gas, amidst which it rolled about like dust, drowning the customers in a gradually thickening mist. And from this cloud there issued a deafening and confused uproar, cracked voices, clinking of glasses, oaths and blows sounding like detonations. So Gervaise pulled a very wry face, for such a sight is not funny for a woman, especially when she is not used to it. She was stifling with a smarting sensation in her eyes, and her head already feeling heavy from the alcoholic fumes exhaled by the whole place. Then she suddenly experienced the sensation of something more unpleasant still behind her back. She turned round and beheld the still, the machine which manufactured drunkards, working away beneath the glass roof of the narrow courtyard with the profound trepidation of its hellish cookery. Of an evening, the copper parts looked more mournful than ever, lit up only on their rounded surface with one big red glint. And the shadows of the apparatus on the wall at the back formed most abominable figures, bodies with tails, monsters opening their jaws as though to swallow everyone up. "Listen, mother talk too much. Don't make any of your grimaces," cried Coupeau. "To blazes, you know, with all wet blankets. What'll you drink?" "Nothing, of course," replied the laundress. "I haven't dined yet." "Well, that's all the more reason for having a glass. A drop of something sustains one." But as she still retained her glum expression, My Boots again did the gallant. "Madame probably likes sweet things," murmured he. "I like men who don't get drunk," retorted she, getting angry. "Yes, I like a fellow who brings home his earnings and who keeps his word when he makes a promise." "Ah, so that's what upsets you," said the zinc worker, without ceasing to chuckle. "Yes, you want your share. Then, big goose, why do you refuse a drink? Take it, it's so much to the good." She looked at him fixedly, in a grave manner, a wrinkle marking her forehead with a black line, and she slowly replied, "Why, you're right, it's a good idea. That way we can drink up the coin together." Bibi the smoker rose from his seat to fetch her a glass of anisette. She drew her chair up to the table. Whilst she was sipping her anisette, a recollection suddenly flashed across her mind. She remembered the plum she had taken with Coupeau near the door in the old days when he was courting her. At that time she used to leave the juice of fruits preserved in brandy. And now here was she going back to liqueurs. Oh, she knew herself well. She had not 2 thimblefuls of will. One would only have to have given her a walloping across the back to have made her regularly wallow in drink. The anisette even seemed to be very good, perhaps rather too sweet and slightly sickening. She went on sipping as she listened to Salted Mouth, otherwise Drink Without Thirst, tell of his affair with Fat Eulalie, a fish peddler and very shrewd at locating him. Even if his comrades tried to hide him, she could usually sniff him out when he was late. Just the night before, she had slapped his face with a flounder to teach him not to neglect going to work. Bibi the smoker and My Boots nearly split their sides laughing. They slapped Gervaise on the shoulder and she began to laugh also, finding it amusing in spite of herself. They then advised her to follow Eulalie's example and bring an iron with her so as to press Coupeau's ears on the counters of the wine shops. "Ah, well, no thanks," cried Coupeau as he turned upside down the glass his wife had emptied. "You pump it out pretty well. Just look, you fellow, she doesn't take long over it." "Will Madame take another?" asked Salted Mouth, otherwise Drink Without Thirst. No, she had had enough. Yet she hesitated. The anisette had slightly bothered her stomach. She should have taken straight brandy to settle her digestion. She cast side glances at the drunkard manufacturing machine behind her. That confounded pot, as round as the stomach of a tinker's fat wife, with its nose that was so long and twisted, sent a shiver down her back, a fear mingled with a desire. Yes, one might have thought it the metal pluck of some big wicked woman, of some witch who was discharging drop by drop the fire of her entrails. A fine source of poison, an operation which should have been hidden away in a cellar. It was so brazen and abominable. But all the same, she would have liked to have poked her nose inside it, to have sniffed the odour, have tasted the filth, though the skin might have peeled off her burnt tongue like the rind off an orange. "What's that you're drinking?" asked she slyly of the men, her eyes lighted up by the beautiful golden colour of their glasses. "That, old woman," answered Coupeau, "is Père Colombe's camphor. Don't be silly now, and we'll give you a taste." And when they had brought her a glass of the vitriol, the rot gut, and her jaws had contracted at the first mouthful, the zinc worker resumed, slapping his thighs. "Ah, it tickles your gullet. Drink it off at one go. Each glassful cheats the doctor of 6 francs. At the second glass, Gervaise no longer felt the hunger which had been tormenting her. Now she had made it up with Coupeau. She no longer felt angry with him for not having kept his word. They would go to the circus some other day. It was not so funny to see jugglers galloping about on horses. There was no rain inside Père Colombe's, and if the money went in brandy, at least one had it in one's body. One drank it bright and shining like beautiful liquid gold. Ah, here she was ready to send the whole world to blazes. Life was not so pleasant after all. Besides, it seemed some consolation to her to have her share in squandering the cash. As she was comfortable, why should she not remain? One might have a discharge of artillery. She did not care to budge once she had settled in a heap. She nursed herself in a pleasant warmth, her bodice sticking to her back, overcome by a feeling of comfort which benumbed her limbs. She laughed all to herself, her elbows on the table, a vacant look in her eyes, highly amused by 2 customers, a fat heavy fellow and a tiny shrimp, seated at a neighbouring table and kissing each other lovingly. Yes, she laughed at the things to see in l'assommoir, at Père Colombe's full moon face, a regular bladder of lard, at the customers smoking their short clay pipes, yelling and spitting, and at the big flames of gas which lighted up the looking-glasses and the bottles of liqueurs. The smell no longer bothered her; on the contrary, it tickled her nose, and she thought it very pleasant. Her eyes slightly closed, while she breathed very slowly, without the least feeling of suffocation, tasting the enjoyment of the gentle slumber which was overcoming her. Then, after her 3rd glass, she let her chin fall on her hands. She now only saw Coupeau and his comrades, and she remained nose to nose with them, quite close, her cheeks warmed by their breath, looking at their dirty beards as though she had been counting the hairs. My Boots drooled, his pipe between his teeth, with the dumb and grave air of a dozing ox. Bibi the smoker was telling a story, the manner in which he emptied a bottle at a draught, giving it such a kiss that one instantly saw its bottom. Meanwhile, Salted Mouth, otherwise Drink Without Thirst, had gone and fetched the Wheel of Fortune from the counter and was playing with Coupeau for drinks. 200, you're lucky. You get high numbers every time. The needle of the wheel grated, and the figure of Fortune, a big red woman placed under glass, turned round and round until it looked like a mere spot in the centre, similar to a wine stain. 350, you must have been inside it, you confounded Lascar. I shan't play any more. Gervaise amused herself with the Wheel of Fortune. She was feeling awfully thirsty and calling My Boots my child. Behind her, the machine for manufacturing drunkards continued working, with its murmur of an underground stream, and she despaired of ever stopping it, of exhausting it, filled with a sullen anger against it, feeling a longing to spring upon the big still as upon some animal, to kick it with her heels and stave in its belly. Then everything began to seem all mixed up. The machine seemed to be moving itself, and she thought she was being grabbed by its copper claws, and that the underground stream was now flowing over her body. Then the room danced round. The gas jets seemed to shoot like stars. Gervaise was drunk. She heard a furious wrangle between Salted Mouth, otherwise Drink Without Thirst, and that rascal Pere Colombe. There was a thief of a landlord who wanted one to pay for what one had not had. Yet one was not at a gangster's hangout. Suddenly there was a scuffling, yells were heard, and tables were upset. It was Pere Colombe who was turning the party out without the least hesitation and in the twinkling of an eye. On the other side of the door they blackguarded him and called him a scoundrel. It still rained and blew icy cold. Gervaise lost Coupeau, found him, and then lost him again. She wished to go home. She felt the shops to find her way. This sudden darkness surprised her immensely. At the corner of the Rue des Poissonniers, she sat down in the gutter, thinking she was at the wash-house. The water which flowed along caused her head to swim and made her very ill. At length she arrived. She passed stiffly before the concierge's room, where she perfectly recognized the Lorilleuxs and the Poissons seated at the table having dinner, and who made grimaces of disgust on beholding her in that sorry state. She never remembered how she had got up all those flights of stairs. Just as she was turning into the passage at the top, little Lalie, who heard her footsteps, hastened to meet her, opening her arms caressingly and saying with a smile, "Madame Gervaise, papa has not returned. Just come and see my little children sleeping. Oh, they look so pretty." But on beholding the laundress's besotted face, she tremblingly drew back. She was acquainted with that brandy-laden breath, those pale eyes, that convulsed mouth. Then Gervaise stumbled past without uttering a word, whilst the child, standing on the threshold of her room, followed her with her dark eyes, grave and speechless. End of chapter 10. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.